Welcome back to ESBR Boxing. I'm joined by my good friend Paul Kelly today, and we're discussing sort of the latest in Anthony Joshua and his training situation and rumours that he's likely to sort of move forward training with Roy Jones Jr. AJ's been quoted recently as saying that whilst he would work with Robert Garcia again, he wants to be a free spirit. Not exactly sure what that means. And Roy Jones has came out recently and said that he's had positive talks with AJ about potentially training him and that they'll be actually going through some trial training together. Whether that be a week, 2 weeks, I'm not too sure. Thought there was no better man to get on than yourself, Paul, the sort of resident chair of the ESBR Boxing AJ fan club. What's your initial reaction? What are your thoughts on potentially a link up between Joshua and Roy Jones Jr.?
I think you're right. I'm glad you asked me to come on this because it's a perfect discussion for me. Without trying to wax lyrical about Joshua for however long, and I could do that for hours. But no, in all seriousness, with his training situation, um, I think Roy Jones Jr. is obviously, he's one of the best boxers there's been in recent time. Not even in recent time. A lot of people have him as one of the best to ever do it, and you can't really disagree with that. In terms of training, we've only really seen him with Eubank Jr. And yes, Eubank Jr. He's had two, three fights with Roy Jones. Um, one of which was the Liam Williams fight, his last fight, which he won basically every round, got a couple of knockdowns. And you'd kind of say that Eubank isn't the same style as obviously he's a completely different style than what Jones fought at. Jones fought like same as Joshua, completely different styles. Joshua is nowhere near as fluid and as naturally gifted a boxer as Roy Jones Jr. But I completely see what Joshua means. When he says this free spirit thing, I think what he's trying to say is, there's no harm in getting as much information as you can from lots of different trainers. So, Roy Jones Jr. has a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience that he can definitely pass on to Joshua. Whether or not I'd say it being a long term thing is another question. I think Joshua definitely did better in the rematch against Usyk with what Robert Garcia did with him. So I think, again, a lot of people might think that was his first fight with Robert Garcia. Maybe he should stick with him and another one or two fights. You'll get the full package of the Garcia Joshua relationship. But at the same time, I can't really knock him. At the end of the day, he lost the Usyk fight. He'll be knowing in his head, he's like, I don't want to lose again. He said that
Yeah.
before. He says he hates losing. I don't want to lose again. Roy Jones Jr., despite boxing on a little too long and losing a good few fights that he would never have lost in his prime, he's a serial winner, really, isn't he?
Of course.
So even that mentality wise, getting Joshua to kind of believe in himself, because I think that's quite apparent recently as well. Not the belief, perhaps, but he's a little bit gun shy. Joshua recently, hasn't let his hands go. Perhaps going away from his old killer style. And yes, I know Roy Jones Jr. was more of a boxer than Joshua will ever be. And that's no disrespect to Joshua. It's just completely different styles. But I think he can definitely help him. So what I'm trying to say is more or less long way about it. Yeah, I think he can help him. Is it the right decision? I don't know. I do see why he's doing it, but I just really don't know. I think it's difficult to say until we actually see the two of them working together.
Yeah, it's a funny one. It's interesting you touch on the fact, like, obviously, we don't need to go into what Roy Jones achieved in his career, but I think someone like that and someone personality wise, someone with that sort of stature could maybe go some ways into getting over like the sort of mental, I don't want to say mental issues, but sort of like, as you mentioned, like the gun shyness that we've sort of seen in AJ in recent fights, sort of the scarring from that Ruiz knockout. So we can see how a personality like Roy Jones would help in terms of like a stylistic pairing. Chris Eubank Jr. has become a completely different fighter under Roy Jones, and I've seen interviews with Roy Jones when he speaks about like his approach to training, and he does seem to try and like mold fighters in his image, which in terms of Anthony Joshua, I struggle to see, to be honest. Obviously, both very explosive, but apart from that, that's probably where the similarities end. And it's interesting you touch on the sort of the changing from Garcia after just one fight, and even you look at sort of the whole sort of thing around Anthony Joshua as a whole. It's meant to get back out really quick. It was meant to be sort of end of November, December. Now it looks like February, March. Doesn't know who his trainer is. Doesn't know who he's fighting. it just doesn't look great to me. What are your thoughts on that as well? Just sort of like the fact that he still doesn't know who he's training. He's going through like so he's meant to be doing this trial with Roy Jones. He done this before. He was trialing all these different camps. Is that what's best for him?
It's difficult to say. I think if you're Joshua, he's trialed what he tried a good few before. Even yeah, obviously Robert Garcia was one of them. He obviously had, and his name's just escaped me, Canelo's trainer. He's
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, you know, went and tried with all of them,
yeah.
and he's clearly learned a lot from each of them. Um, but he went with Garcia because he thought that was the best mold, the best fit. Um, in terms of training, Joshua, I think the thing that we're not forgetting here is, but let's be honest, there's not one trainer in the world boxing that wouldn't want to work with Anthony Joshua. You know,
Of course.
not just the fact that they would get paid a shed load to be his trainer, but like he is a superstar, and he on his day, you know, he's still he's lost 3 fights now, but he's still a top three, definitely top five heavyweight.
Of course.
Um, so you know, the trainers would be queuing up to work with him. The fact that he hasn't actually appointed one and he's going to do this trial thing again, you know, where does it end? I suppose you could say as well. If he does go to Roy Jones for 2 weeks and he doesn't really like it, does he go another 2 weeks and train with somebody else? And does that push his fight further back? And then all of a sudden, is it the summer that he's fighting again? You just don't know. I think that the most important thing about you touched on there, we were you know we could have been seeing the Fury fight, in theory, you know, in a couple of weeks' time, in a month's time. We're not obviously getting that Fury fighting Chisora, and Joshua not fighting. I think the key is I saw an interview with Joshua not so long ago. I can't remember who it was with, and he mentioned the fact that physically, you know, he's ready to fight whenever, whoever. But it's more everyone like his friends, people he trusts around him, telling him that he needs a bit of a mental break. Because you know, a lot of people did see after that Usyk fight that was a bit of a mental breakdown. Um, so people are maybe saying, yes, you know what, you are physically. He's always in shape
Of course.
physically. He can do the training. He's ready to go. You know, he could probably be ready to go in about a month's time if if it needed to, because he's just always in shape. He's one of those fighters. But I think the 6 months, although I don't like it in terms of ring rust and stuff, I think for his mental state, and I think it could do him the world of good. Maybe not coming out. I don't want it to go any later than March, April at a push. Um, but even then, you know, we're talking about that's going to be back on the 2 fights a year. And I think if you're Joshua, if I was Joshua, I want to fight 3 times a year. I think it's just better to do that. Especially, obviously, it's different when you're losing, but when you're winning, first of all, he needs to get a win.
Yeah.
When he gets a win, I think he will get a win no matter who he fights next. You know, there's been a couple of names thrown about, like your Michael Hunters and your um Zangs and your Otto Vollins and stuff. Do you know what? I think one of those opponents is perfect because they're still a good name, top 10, 15, 20 heavyweight, which I think he could beat all of them. So I think it's important for him that it's more of the mental thing that he was talking about. He's ready to go, but people around him who he trusts have said, relax, Josh, you know, take another few months, get your mental state right, forget about boxing for another month or two, enjoy yourself, then come back. And it's more of the mental break that he's needed.
Yeah, yeah, I completely see that as well. It's just going to be interesting to see in terms of opponents what it looks like in 2023 for him because I think from what Eddie Hearn said and stuff, it looks like that white rematch is going to be the one they push for. And it'll be interesting to see if he has a sort of a knockover job essentially in March and then they do that in the stadium in the summer, or whether they go straight in to someone like White. I think the last point I was sort of making, Joshua, we sort of chat about like, oh, what's went wrong since the Ruiz fight? It's not the same fighter, and then you have the two Usyk fights that he's lost, and we had this idea of Joshua in our head as at one point the best heavyweight in the world. I think he would have been the consensus number one, if not number two at a stage. I think it's just important to remember that when we were saying that, Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk weren't competing in the heavyweight division. And I think people can read a lot into like game plans for the Usyk fight. Sometimes you just come up against a better fighter. And you know what I mean? I could step in there with Alexander Usyk and there'd be no game plan I could implement. So yeah. I think you can overrate it up too much a lot with the whole training situation. I think just for his own sake, he just needs to be somewhere settled, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I think they're getting away from. I like the fact that he was training away from home. I think that's sometimes good. I've said before in one of our previous videos about training away, let the hair grow, let the beard grow, look scruffy. All the get the dog and all back, and yeah, I agree with that. He does need to settle. Funny, just the last thing I want to mention, and my good friend Elliot Grigg, if when he watches this, will I'm sure be laughing. But you said there about White rematch. I think it's a good fight for Joshua. And
Yeah,
you mentioned whether he has like a 1 round, 2 round job before that. Well, I'd go as far as saying I think Dylan White it could be the knockover job. So a White fight in March. If White beats Franklin, then yeah, White in March is the knockover job. And then in the summer, late summer, he maybe fights we'll see. It could the Ruiz trilogy happen. Depends on what Ruiz Wilder happen. Could Wilder fight happen? Could the Fury fight happen in the summer? Depending on how everything goes, you never know. Because we did see Fury saying it would be a damn travesty if they never fought. So it's clear that the two boxers do want to fight each other. It's just the promoters and everything. But yeah, I think to sum it all up, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Danny. About he just needs to settle somewhere. Trust that he's made the right choice with trainer, whether that be Roy Jones, whether it does stay with Robert Garcia. He just needs to trust that he's made the right decision, and hopefully we see the best from him in the not too distant future.
yeah, 100%. There's no point even sitting here trying to like predict what's going to happen in 2023 with the heavyweight division. I think we've been fans of boxing for too long to know that like there's nothing you can be certain of. But we'll wrap it up there, Paul. Thanks a million for coming on. Really enjoyed the chat, and yeah, hopefully there's an announcement soon for Josh's sake. But I will leave it there. Just be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that. Who do you think would be a good fit for Joshua as a trainer? And thanks for watching. Cheers.
Cheers.